When one is planning to walk amongst the Titans, one needs to be prepared if they wish to survive. That was what Marion's father had always told her, warning her every time as they geared up to explore the Junklands. Her godmother had always been hesitant about the idea of anyone venturing for supplies in the Junklands. Valuable though they were, she always cautioned that the risk was too great. She had heard her father and godmother arguing countless times before on the subject, the human gesturing and grumbling as the insectoid alien chittered and screeched, the table occasionally clattering as one or the other would slam a hand or a foreclaw on it to enunciate a point. It was a debate rooted in common sense and concern, though, for Marion's mother had been taken from them by a Titan, and her godmother had friends and family who had perished on the end of the Titan's weapons. This time, though, their need to venture into the Junklands was unavoidable. The farm had an unfortunate micrometeoroid strike square in the middle of their solar array, shattering it into uselessness. They had plenty of options for heat for cooking, with fires kindled by local dried brush and sticks, and light at night could be provided by fire, or, when more subtle light was needed, for godmother and her kin were capable of emitting a phosphorescent light. It was something her father jokingly referred to as the biggest damn fireflies I ever saw. But crucially, the electricity was needed to charge and maintain the decoy drones her father had created after the loss of their mother, and they would go out once or twice a week, carrying with them what Marion had as a child nicknamed the yuck tube. A combination of blood, sweat, snot, and discarded or damaged clothing, the homogenized and chunky mixture was flown out somewhere remote, dripping a trail of human DNA and biosamples to lead the Titans away from their homestead. Without it, the Titans would come knocking sooner or later, so a salvaged solar panel was needed, and quickly. Marion and her godmother had barely entered past the outer reaches of the Junklands when they caught the first signs of the Titan's presence. It was a strider, something that looked like a metal crab on two tall legs, with bladed pincers cutting and probing as it turned over parts of a destroyed military shuttle, one with paint that had long ago faded into rusted oblivion. Marion sighed in relief, knowing that these striders lacked the sensors needed to pick up on subtle traces of human DNA, instead relying on raw visual recognition. However, she was still intimidated by the sight of the 30-foot-tall mechanical construct lumbering around, the rumbling shriek of its source tubing dragging behind it as it scraped over broken wing panels and door hatches. Her godmother had become agitated at the sight as well, flaring her wings and chittering quietly to Marion. There was a smell of smoked meat, a pheromone her godmother was emitting to emphasize her stress, and one that Mayan knew by now was a sign that she was itching to fight, even if such a fight would be ill-advised for only two to take on a strider by themselves. The strider had stepped closer to the rock they were hiding behind. It was still ignorant to their presence, but Marion didn't dare speak for fear of echoing off the rocks and alerting the robotic monster. So she waved quietly in front of her godmother's compound eyes to draw her attention, before pulling up her wrist gauntlet and pressing carefully on several rubbery bulbs embedded into it. They contained extracts or reproductions of several of the more common pheromones, and together Marion tried to communicate to her that they needed to be cautious and quiet, as they were not ready to fight a strider by themselves. Her godmother just cocked her head and flared her wings slightly, in action that she realized was either confusion or disgust. Realizing she must not have gotten the pheromone mix quite right, Mary gave a sniff, wrinkled her nose and realizing what she was missing, and added a few pumps of that into the air as well. Her godmother settled, wings tucking back under her carapace and taloned forearms retracting back. Then she saw it, a perfectly intact solar panel, almost twice as big as the one her dad had asked her to try to find, and sitting unclaimed and pristine at the top of the top edge of an otherwise shattered shuttle that had crashed a few hundred yards away. Unfortunately, she could also tell the strider was starting to make its way over that way, and a single misstep of its pointed and heavy feet could break it and set them back to square one in their search. Marion gestured excitedly to her godmother, who followed her gaze and tapped her claws quietly against the rock in anticipation. Her species' eyesight wasn't as strong at long distances, but she trusted Marion's judgment and leaned down slightly to offer her a step up onto the back of the larger alien shell. It was uncomfortable to ride for very long thanks to the numerous thorny growths and protrusions on the insectoid exoskeleton, but it was bearable enough for a short sprint to be worth the discomfort in order to gain the increased speed her godmother could provide. Marion sat into position and gave a double tap of her hand gently against her godmother's thorax. The alien crouched, preparing for a burst of speed. Watching carefully, Marion waited until the strider had turned to the side, examining an empty drop pod. That was when she gave a single tap to the side of her godmother's shell, and the alien took off like a shot, crossing the distance at far faster than Marion would be able to, even at a dead sprint. However, she had not seen the nature of the debris between them and the solar panel. It was nothing that would stop them, only lightweight paneling, but it meant that the chitinous footsteps of her godmother on the metal echoed and rattled around the small canyon. Her godmother didn't slow, but Marion could feel her stomach drop as the strider spun to investigate source of the noise and spotted them. "Abduction observed," came an ear-rattlingly loud roar from some speaker on the machine. "Attempting rescue of human from hostile bug." Marion winced at the slur, but her godmother appeared not to notice, although she dove into a slide along her foreclaws in order to help them pass beneath a swinging and snapping metal claw as the strider attempted to grab hold of Marion. She could smell another pheromone puff coming from dorsal nodes on her godmother's head, an acrid and acidic tang that would have been the equivalent of a human shouting, "I'll lead them away!" Marion's eyes widened, but she nodded, giving a single tap to the side of the shell as acknowledgement. As they quickly came upon the solar panel, she leapt off, and without slowing down, her godmother continued in a wide arc to try to lead the strider away. It worked, but unfortunately the strider's other claw was coming at an angle hidden by the rest of its body, and it struck her godmother squarely on the side. Marion screamed "no" as she saw her fly through the air, landing in a heap a few dozen paces from the solar panel that Marion was trying to detach. She could still see her godmother was moving and breathing, but it was shallow and she could see an oozing trickle of blue-tinged blood coming from beneath her still form. The strider, though, had turned, saying, "Bug neutralized, retrieving lost passenger." It turned to Marion, who stood defiantly as she managed to wrest the panel free of its housing. But then a red, thin line of light shot out from a sensor cluster on top of the strider as it uttered aloud, "Scanning for passenger contamination." The laser stopped at Marion's leg, and she abruptly remembered when she had broken it falling off of the barn a few years before. It had been a bad break, but to help stabilize it, her godmother and her clutch mates had quickly fashioned a support beam made of an extruded epoxy-like spit, supported with some web material normally used for their incubation cocoons. It had needed to be applied directly to her exposed and broken thigh bone, as her father told her while she recovered in the following weeks. Her recovery had been far faster than it would have been with traditional metal pins, if those had even been able to be located and sterilized in time for the surgery. She hardly even remembered that she'd had the procedure or still had the alien support structure still embedded in her leg, apart from a few fading surface scars, but the laser had stopped there as a command issued again from the speaker. "Passenger contamination detected." Marion gritted her teeth, preparing for a fight, but at least glad that it was just a lone strider. Glad that is until the speaker continued. "Contamination frequency of passengers crosses sigma threshold of significance. Contamination theory of bug invasion confirmed. Deploying additional systems to eliminate invasion threat." She saw lights flashing along the tubing dragging behind the strider and could feel her heart stop as she saw the mountainside behind them start to rumble, the shape of the Titan slowly awakening as it stood, thousands of feet high, swarming with hundreds of other striders like matted hair dangling around an eerily human-shaped form. In a voice louder than thunder, the Titan uttered, "Humanity will be protected from the bug threat, no matter the cost." But then she heard something that gave her a glimmer of hope. The distant sounds of sirens and klaxons began echoing across the junklands, from all the perimeter settlements and hives bordering the location the Titan had slumbered. They were preparing to fight, humans alongside the aliens they had allied with, and hopefully this time they could destroy the godlike construct for good.